The revolution may not be televised, but it will be broadcasted. Welcome back to True Culture, where we stay true to all cultures, especially our own. I am with my partner in shine, Jay Sade. I'm the host who loves you the most, Am Waddy. And today we have the pleasure of tapping in with world-renowned fashion designer, master tailor, creator of Kingdom Menswear, Mr. Shaka King, Mr. Royal Highness himself, Mr. Shaka King. How you doing today, Mr. King?
I'm good. How are you, Waddy?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so glad to have you here today, brother. Let's give our brother Shaka King a warm True Culture welcome. Let's do it. Yes, yes. So glad to have him here with us today. So glad to have him here with us today. Miss Shaka.
Thank you.
We're going to get right into it, Mr. Royal Highness himself. Tell us a little bit about your fashion journey and what inspired you to become a fashion designer.
Okay, what inspired me to become a fashion designer? I had a cousin and she had a sewing machine and she used to make all her own clothes. And we came over like we normally would do, hanging out with her. And she had a bunch of fabric on her bed. And then next week we went to the Orange Bowl Classic and she had on an outfit. And I recognized that the fabric from the bed was the outfit she had on. So I asked her, did she make it? And she said, yes. And I instinctively said, well, if you can do that, I can do it. So she was like, okay, well, you can have my scrap fabrics. And she did. And I took them home and I just started cutting out clothes for my little sisters, like you cut out dog clothes for the most part. And I just started playing around on the sewing machine when nobody was home because we had one. It was in my parents' room. My father bought it for my mother. I definitely did not want him catching me on the sewing machine. So I would always sneak in. If I came home from school early enough, I would. And if I didn't have any like events to go to, or I was always in clubs and groups and so forth and so on. So yeah, and I just would start practicing on that. And then one day he came home and caught me on the sewing machine. And he casually said, do you use it? And I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, put it in your room because your mom don't use it and I want a chair up in here.
Wow.
So I put it in, I put it in my room, but I would always have to take it out of my room and put it right next to the dining room and the kitchen because of that electrical outlet was easier for me to use and be able to sit at the machine because it was the type that was in a table already, in a little table. A singer. And so that started it. And then I just started making clothes and then I started doing fashion shows at the school, at my high school. And then I knew I wanted to be a fashion designer once I heard the name fashion designer. Because prior to that, people would always say something like, oh yeah, you're a great tailor, or you're a great seamstress. Definitely, I was like, none of those work. Because I knew it was something other than that. I mean, I was familiar with what that looked like. I knew people, women who sewed, they were considered seamstress. And my father got a lot of his clothes custom made from a place called King the Tailor. So I knew what that was about. I knew what that looked like because I was able to experience that as a kid with him or my uncles getting that stuff, you know, custom made or either tailored to fit them, but usually custom made and then tailored to fit. So that's just how it started. And I started doing fashion shows locally and at the high school and, you know, like Spirit Week and not Orange Bowl Class, but like, what do you call it, homecoming, things like that. And then my parents said I could go to college where I wanted to. I wanted to go to college in New York for fashion design because fashion capital. And that's where I went. I went to Pratt Institute. And upon graduating from Pratt, I was already making clothes for some of the principal dancers at Alvin Ailey, Dance Theater of Harlem.
That is dope.
Joffrey Ballet. So then I was already doing that. Plus I was making clothes for the club kids because you had the Garage at that time, the Palladium, Studio 54, Buttermilk Bottom. So I was making clothes for the club kids that were going out because you dressed differently, you know, back then.
Yeah.
By the 80s.
Now, I noticed you spoke on sewing and tailoring. Now, I've noticed that a lot of fashion designers, they can design, but they can't sew. You, on the other hand, can do both. Correct. So I'm curious as to, you know, your thoughts on that, and also like how has being able to do both made a difference in your career?
Well, it's made a big difference for me because considering lots of times I must work remote, then I know exactly what I'm looking for. So when I'm interviewing seamstress or tailors or anyone that sews, if I'm interviewing them, they need to bring me a sample of their work, and I can see it from the door, really.
Mm.
Simply because sewing, I know what a proper edge stitch or a top stitch or an inserted pocket or whatever it may be, what it should look like, or at least what I want it to look like. You know, other designers have different criteria, and not for me, that doesn't work, especially since a lot of my silhouettes are simple but tailored, but it's deceptive because there's a lot of tailoring going into it in the fabric and the lay and the fit of the actual garment. So it helped me. Now, tailoring and sewing for people is one thing, which I never really signed up for because as a designer, I don't really like you giving me the fabric you want to use and telling me how you want me to make it. I am open to collaborations because you as the client, that's what you is when you're coming in, that's what you are when you're coming in for a custom item. When you're coming in, I want to be able to sit down and collaborate with you. I want to understand what you like, your colors, your flavor, where you're going, how you feel about it, how do you normally dress, what colors you don't like. All these things go and factor into me creating something for you. But I still like to base it on my silhouette.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
So if you want color for something that I don't make colorful, I have no problem with any of that. It's just that some people come in clear. They bring in the fabric, and then the fabric isn't what they thought it was because they sold them this idea that this fabulous fabric and this natural fibers. And oh, disclaimer: I only use natural fibers. I really have a problem with man-made fibers unless
Such quality fabrics you use. You only use quality fabrics for sure.
um,
I can
I
vouch for that.
I just don't like how man-made fibers hang.
Yeah.
If you're draping with them, that's different. It works a lot better that way. But there's not too much draping I'm going to do in my clothing, especially if my focus is menswear. I mean, I definitely will add pleats and things like that to create a draping effect. But again, that's a flat pattern type of thing. So, and tailoring, I don't have a problem with tailors. Personally, I don't necessarily like doing it, and I get my own things tailored. But
Right.
sometimes when customers are buying things from me, I understand the need for them to want me to alter it. And I'm cool with that. I just don't like you bringing in items to me to fix or to hem or except my family. I can't get around that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say it's so important for. I think it's important for designers to know how to sew. So I'm glad that you do.
Well, now, so designers that don't sew, I don't have an aversion to whether you can sew or not sew. That's really a personal thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do have a problem with those people who are calling themselves designers and all they're doing is remaking a jean jacket in a hot fabric.
So what is
Yes.
a designer if it's not that? Well, how would you define it?
Well, I would more see it as maybe some type of creative director type of aspect when it comes to creating like that. I mean, if you're just going to take an existing silhouette and just refabric it, I can understand where that's the belief out there that, well, then that is being a designer. And I guess on some level it is. But me coming from Pratt Institute, School of Draping, old school way of doing design, knowing fashion history, going way, way, way back, understanding how things have changed and altered and fused. In this fused world we do, that's considered a designer and acceptable. And okay, I can't really knock that. You just kind of, refabricating selling a silhouette that sells like a real house would do. But there's
Right.
plenty of them out there that just like that though. That's just it.
Yeah.
But when you're fashion designers and true designers out there know what I mean, they know it's more to it than you're looking at. My approach is that you're sitting down with a customer and talking about what they need and creating something around that. And that may, even if they want a jean jacket, it just may not be the basic Levi silhouette.
Right.
It just so happens the fabric I'm using is denim. But it's not so much that it's a Levi's denim jacket. It's probably a tailored jacket that maybe I do deconstruct and all of that, but it's a lot going into the deconstruction because it's not just simply taking a razor blade and slashing it. It's considering the placement, how it's going to situate the body, Yeah, if I could throw some pictures, I'll give you some examples.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you feel like pop culture has influenced how we define what a designer is or a fashion designer is, in your opinion?
Because of their urgency and their skewed view, a bit like, they've seen things in a smaller, more focused lens coming at them from 50 Directions. So if 50 Directions says a hot pink baseball jacket is it, everybody wants that, so everybody jumps on that bandwagon. Like when Gucci came out, Gucci had patches everywhere. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those patches resembled the exact same ones that you could already buy online on eBay or Amazon. So I think that might have been part of the riff of them doing it, but they were able to do it in a luxurious way where they used clipped silk for the threads and they added beading and so forth and so on. But at that time, you could easily buy a pre-made item, like a basic silhouette of a jacket or a skirt or a pant or a sweatsuit, and then you could go back and either stitch those on, heat press those on, and add trims and stuff. And people started doing that, embellishing existing silhouettes, if you will, and then selling them and saying they're design. And while there was a lot of creativity in it, loosely, yes, I guess, because I don't really want them to be coming at me like, oh, you can say I'm not a designer, but I guess
Dapper Dan comes into mind when you say that. The first person that came into mind was Dapper Dan, and how he would put his own flavor on a lot of unique.
Yeah. Well, what he did was, I mean, all hats off to him.
Yeah.
There were straight up designs in it. It's just that the culture demanded the labels, and the labels wasn't listening to the culture. So it was easy enough to make sure they were in the emblems and the status symbols and imagery, iconography at the time, and then create designs, because behind each one of those things he put LV or Gucci or whatever on, there was a whole silhouette attached to that.
Right. That was his own uniqueness, man. I love how he put that together.
And then he did other clothing outside, I think, just the labels. I mean, he still worked with suede and leather and so forth and so on. But so it was a whole look, and the look helped define the era or the actual look of hip hop classics.
Yeah, and we just mentioned Dapper Dan, and I know you have been all over the world. You work with so many different people. Can you name a few people you work with? I know you work with Jay-Z a few times, and there's a lot of people you work with. Can you name a few?
Well, some of them I work directly with, and other them I work through people with. So they would pull my clothing with specific things to possibly get in a shoot or make the cover of a magazine. So that was actually how I was able to deal with Jay-Z. My biggest group of guys I actually dealt with a lot were mostly ball players. And there would be like Horace Grant, John Sally, Chris Webber. I would have to start looking at paperwork to give you the exact names. Alonzo Mourning, Will Downing. I worked with Layla Rashawn, got past some of my clothes. Eric Alexander, Jada Pinkett came and bought some stuff from me directly from my place in Brooklyn at the time. It was like,
I know that was dope.
Yeah. A lot of things happened like that in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah. It just wasn't any social media to capture them. If we could have done that, or there was a way to really, really capture without pulling out a video camera and you're pulling out a real camera or an instant camera. I do have Polaroids of a lot of people because that was the thing.
I love Polaroids. I wish we could just go back to Polaroids.
Movies, I've done plenty of. I guess Miami Vice would be one that Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell was in. White Men Can't Jump. That was another one. I think with Harry Belafonte and John Travolta. It's a lot of things that come in and out.
Yeah, you've been doing it for years. You've definitely been perfecting your craft.
I'm trying to figure out like who is newer that I'm working with that I could actually talk about, because some of them I can't really talk about.
Yeah, we know your top secret on a lot of these people that you work with, which is understandable.
Well, that's because they don't want the attention, and I get it. Oh, I've done some work with Tobias Trevelyan.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Several things, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So how has it, following your dream of being a fashion designer, how has it changed your life? I mean, in addition to all of the people that you get to design for and get to work with.
Well, and that is what it's really about, because all of that other stuff you just named, it's okay. And it is what it is. But what I do enjoy from that part is being able to be creative, interact with people, talk, share ideas, vibrate together, be on the same page, just to be community, to feel some kind of warmth and love and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that's pretty much what that's about. Mm-hmm. So you asked me a question, which I forgot the question, but the last part is what I really wanted to touch on, and that doesn't, whatever. Oh, it has made me independent. And then the independence has given me strength, a positive attitude, and a lot of self-worth. I came from a background of that, but once I got to New York, if you don't have a body of armor to wear around there, you're going to get eaten up. I had confidence and belief in myself. And at home, which was Miami, Florida, I grew up in Miami, at home, they nurtured that. So I got nurtured at a real young, early age. So I had a lot of confidence by the time I was in high school. And
it because when you talked about how the sewing machine was in your parents' room and you didn't necessarily want your dad to find out, but when he did, I was quite surprised at his transparency and support to just take it. Your mom's not.
So wait a minute. So then another story with that was I was doing fashion shows locally, and then I got an opportunity. FAMU does the Orange Bowl Classic, so they asked me to be the designer. And my mom kept saying, "You need to invite your father. Why are you going to invite your father to a fashion show? Invite your father to a fashion show." And my thinking was, he doesn't want to be bothered with this, and I don't know if I'm really ready to expose myself like that. I mean, that wasn't my thinking. Of course, as you get older, you understand the scenario and dissecting it now. But lo and behold, I asked him, and he was like, yes. And do you know the electricity went out in the ballroom?
No.
All the electricity went out in the ballroom. We sitting there looking crazy. My father found the fuse box and reconnected the lights.
Wow. Shout out, Dad, man. Good thing he came. Good thing he came.
Yeah, I mean, so look, he was there, and that's what happened. But no, he's always been a big supporter. He owns plenty of Shaka King tailored suits and all that stuff.
That's so nice, man. It's so nice because a lot of parents they don't support their children in that way.
My parents, my mom and my dad are both still alive, and I just sent them a bunch of the masks over the coronavirus situation.
Yeah, I'm loving my Shaka King mask. We they come with filters and everything, so y'all make sure y'all grab a Shaka King mask while you grabbing and the awesome part about your mask is that you can actually make it match your outfit.
Well, yeah. So I made, I had
a whole outfit.
I posted it like that because I figured, okay, let me just do something.
Yeah.
And boy, did it avalanche when I did the bucket with the mask on my Instagram.
And I like my outfit, Shaka. So that really got me. Good. So you gonna have me buy 10 masks and 10 outfits. Like,
well, no, you buy
at least 7, one for every day of the week.
Right.
Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna cut you.
Well, I just wanted, just in case, the folks listening didn't know or watching didn't know, what sorts of men's clothes specifically do you design?
So I do soft tailored men's clothing, and I do athleisure, which is a dressier version of just athletic clothes. I do tailored suits, and then within those categories, coats, pants, jackets, shirts, knits. I do accessories, and I do a jewelry line too. But the jewelry is
yes, he does jewelry too.
Yes,
is that some jewelry? Is that? I think I noticed one of those rings. Are those one of those rings?
No, all of these are just gifted. Well,
okay. Like I thought the middle one over there on that one. I thought I saw that one before, but
I wear this all the time. It's usually on this finger.
Okay.
I wear this all the time.
Okay.
You found a replacement, huh?
Now, Shaka, your designs are without a doubt amazing, right? Can you tell us who and what inspires you while creating your designs?
For the longest of time, living in Brooklyn, just being in New York. I mean, on the train, walking around, but there'll be markers that hit me a certain kind of way, and I guess I just file it back there. But almost everything that I kind of come across can make its way into my designs. And the funny thing is that I don't realize what the inspiration was until after the collection is made. Sometimes I see it going down the runway, or sometimes I may, notice it in a photo shoot, and then realize that, oh, that's what inspired that. So I go to a museum exhibition and see something I really, really like. Maybe let's say the Basquiat exhibit when it was at Brooklyn years ago. And think nothing of it. And then I'm doing all these strange color combinations for spring and summer the following season, or maybe 2 seasons down the line. Or I just take the idea, have the idea that I'm sick of doing things I want to do. I'm just going to throw anything on some coats. And I can because I'm a designer. And go back and realize it was the scribbles or the drawings, or maybe it was the shapes of the Matisse birds that I saw at the Met, or maybe it's the guys next door with their pants drooping off that got me wanting to do exploring India or Malaysia and looking at the dress of workers where a low drop crotch pant is a thing. You know, it just really just depended. I showed a couple of seasons ago, like about 3 seasons ago here in DC, because I'm in DC right now. And with the DC Fashion Incubator, I used to run the DC Fashion Incubator, and the group of designers were showing, and I showed with them 1 season. So I made a collection that was primarily a bunch of white clothes that were flowy and angelic, and all of that is how I saw it, and a bunch of dark rinse denim, rich blue denim pieces, all ripped up, torn up, holed up, and all of that. That was the look. And it wasn't until I had to do the paperwork that night to talk about the inspiration of the collection that I realized the direct influence was, prior to me making the collection, I had went on my Instagram feed and started paying attention more to what was happening with all of the killing of the brothers and the sisters in the streets. And it was Alton Sterling, Philando
Castile,
maybe Eric Garner. It was a list that I had right there. And it was kind of like they were kind of back to back to back. Plus so many other things I was reading in the cops and stuff. And then I created this collection. I realized when some publication asked me the reason why the collection came about based on the turmoil or something that's going on, I realized that was the direct influence of it. The denim was ripped up and torn up because the boys in blue don't give a damn. Excuse me, TV. But they don't.
You're fine on here. It's true culture. Say how you feel.
And I didn't give a fuck how the blue pieces came out. Now, as an artist, they had some structure and meaning to it, but I mean, the stitching was all over the fucking place on them. And it was just all that. And then white is so popular and so right and so the way to be that all of the clothes took on the life of being angelic. And being that the white was in, I realized afterwards, because I had made all the clothes, I just noticed that the white was all angelic, either flow, it was made to flow and to, you know, just and flutter around. It was loose, it was flowy, it was shiny fabrics, it was sheer fabrics. And then I realized that was indirect response to being inspired by that. It was my anger and my frustration, really. And then I guess the part I felt calming. Now, of course, I used all Black models in it, but I was always using all Black models. I would have not the worst time, but I would always get these stupid interviews from these reporters who very few of them looked like me. And they would always ask me whatever stereotypical question they could fashion. So at the time I'm coming up, the ball players are being, you know, dressed and flashy and so forth and so on, and they know that I have that clientele. So, you know, they asked me stuff about hip hop music. And one report asked me what hip hop music did I like? And I said to her, oh, I listen to classical and jazz, but
Good answer.
that's what I listen to my off
Mhm.
my regular time and be inspired by. But I mean, I do play the top 40. Hum a couple of bars, maybe I might know the song. Yeah, your ass can't hum shit because you just trying to ask me some more questions. Like, how would I know? One time they asked me something like I knew Oprah Winfrey. So I simply asked, well, how Liza doing? Liza who? Liza Minnelli. I don't know her. Well, how the hell you think I
Why would they think that you know Oprah? I get what you're
because
saying.
we're both black.
Right.
I'm not even in that
Right.
circle at all. So
Right.
Right. Well, I just wanted to know, how important is it as a designer, as an artist, to reflect the times of what's happening right now?
that's the only kind of designer I am. So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't speak to the ones who don't. There are people who get lost in time. There are people who don't grow. Usually, real designers move forward. So those are usually the imposters who keep rehashing the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
Yeah. Constantly reinventing yourself.
If they're whatever. But if you stay in the business long enough, you are bound to grow, especially if you're open and receptive to it. So it's not like it's not people who start out one way and then go on to a great success. There's some people that just drop in from being, say, a socialite, and then all of a sudden they got a clothing line. But if they have an eye, it works. If you're just connected,
Mm-hmm.
it works. Not with money or anything, just to life. There are so many people that are just floating around existing and
Mhm.
do all these things where if you're trying to do something seriously or be taken serious, then it's going to take some work and preparation on your part. It's going to take some research. It's going to take some looking into. It's going to take some exploring, some failures. It's going to take some questioning. And that don't be happening a lot of time with people. That's not really
Right.
happening. It's a whole nother thing. It's like, how did you do it? I'm going to recreate that formula, then I'm going to do it. And it's not that simple.
How have
Yeah.
your failures prepared you for moving forward to the next phase in your career?
It's a stepping stone, a growth spurt. That's how I would describe it. I'm trying to think of what probably was the biggest failure. I think the biggest failure was I had an order of coats that I was supposed to deliver to Bergdorf Goodman. I had went to, no, it was Henri Bendel's. Henri Bendel's used to have this open cast for designers, and you can come in and show your work, and they would buy from designers. And so they had placed an order, and then right before it was due, like maybe a month, for a small company, that's a big deal because you've been working for months on it, plus
Right.
trying to take commissions, and because trying to wholesale at that time or period, you basically got to give them the stuff and wait for them to pay you, and that don't always happen. And then if you're a small company, it really could be an issue with them respecting you enough to pay you in a timely fashion. But they decided to cancel a big portion of the order, and I had already bought all the fabric. So there was nothing I could do but eat it. Of course, I flipped it and put it on my own line and sold it. I think I turned around. That might have been when I did my very, very, very first pop-up, which at that time were called trunk shows, where
Oh, I love the trunk shows.
that you come up with a huge trunk, open it up, put it on a bunch of people and show it. That was the original premise of that. So I would just have models, the models I used, because I had a stable of guys I used on a regular basis, and go in a venue somewhere, be it a restaurant or hotel lobby or wherever, and do a fashion show and then put up the racks and sell afterwards. So that was one of, and you know what, that wasn't so much it was a failure on my part, it was just what happened, because I still had the products ready for them. So I'm trying to figure out what was an act I could consider as a failure, like I set out to do something and it didn't happen. I'd have to think about that because most of the things I set out to do to make happen happened.
That's
Whether
amazing.
the other party lived up to their end of the bargain. There were several times I went to go see a couple of big companies who wanted to sell my line, put me on as the head designer, so forth and so on. But each time, of course, they wanted your entire stake in the company, which was
Right.
ridiculous, which I thought was just absolutely ridiculous. Or it was some other scam where they have you sign a letter of intent and convince you that it's not binding, when it is binding. You know, so it was always this scenario trying to take advantage, or have you meet them all week in these sessions, brainstorming sessions, and then realize you understood that that was tangible property, or what intellectual property were, and that you pay for all of that. And then if you bring that to their attention, of course, they don't call you anymore.
Right, right. Because they don't want to take responsibility for what they should be taking responsibility for.
Right.
You know,
and
and that's crazy.
You are knowing enough to be able to recognize that someone is trying to, like, you know, come for your intelligence and not give you your worth. A lot of people, I don't feel like, even understand when that process is happening because they're so concerned with the actual the deal that's going down.
You know, I will say this, Jay. Going to church and working within the church structure, I think really prepared me for how people are.
Good point.
And so, because I remember coming to New York and starting to be a part of the scene and just doing different little things, just interacting with other artists and people in school, in college rather. And I remember being able to identify them as a type that I was familiar with, and I could actually figure out how to interact or react to them. And 9 times out of 10, I was close. So it started to become a thing where there's a type, and they usually act this way or it plays out this way. So it kind of didn't get me to the point of constantly being thrown off guard. Don't get me wrong, I was thrown off guard by a couple of people that was closest to me, which is usually the case, the snakes in the grass.
Usually the case.
For the most part, that kind of set me up to being able to navigate that. But then it was also being smart enough to look at cues and signs. So I don't think I was just preoccupied with my own self that much. I was kind of more open to the experience around me. Going for interviews, you know, sometimes it was just, I paid attention to who was walking around, who appeared to be important, who may have been the boss sitting there, you know, on some, I'm just going to sit here and check you out before I introduce myself. Because we're talking about the 80s and the 90s. Well, we know what's happening right now in the workforce when you're brown skinned, when you're African, when you're African American, when you Black, whatever they want to call it. You understand? We know what that looks like. So you just go back 30 years, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And
it's been a while.
You're looking at the same thing. You know, it's always, are you capable? Are you smart enough? Are you what we're looking for? And here I am, a big, tall, Black man, you know, confident, self-assured. I don't think I could shy away from that if I wanted to. Wouldn't have worked my size, so I doubt that I would even chose that particular way to be. And, you know, you just run into the same issues of confidence is always a problem, and you have to find a way to motivate yourself. And I can't really tell people how to do that.
I mean, well, you're so experienced and you're so confident and so talented that it's hard to keep a good man down. You know what I mean? And I know based off the conversations we've had, I know that you've lived all over the world. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the difference in fashion scenes and what experiences you've had based off of, you know, where you were based?
Well, so one of the first things I noticed when going to Paris or London or Italy was their love of American clothes, and I could see the American influence, but then their locale and where they were, the way products are made was it was much more luxurious. There was less room for garbage clothes. So they had plenty of polo shirts, but they, may have been done in silk and rayon or the fabric of that region. So it was always an extraness to the way they dress. Just the small details in the way men dress, with an extra scarf or an ascot or a handkerchief or glasses with a watch and a bracelet and a ring, belt, shoes,
details,
a bag. You know, because I mean, their camera bags they used to carry back then was just amazing. I wanted one just to schlep my stuff around in New York City. The bags were chic and they were hot. The other opposite is going to Cote d'Ivoire and sitting in the airport terminal with nothing but Africans and looking around and realizing, or when I realized this going, oh, he has on my shirt, oh, he has on, oh, I did something like that, I did something like this, and never having been to Africa at all. Mm. That was one of the first things that truly blew me when I started going to Africa, was just that how in sync my aesthetic of design was, and never having been African. So therefore I did realize about bloodline and strength in that, and how it is entirely different, because it was different from anything else. But then I also realized, going to Europe, I loved Italy the most, but then, and I love Sicily, and I love the Sicilian.
Yeah, Sicily is.
But the Milanese too, because that was where fashion is, and I was in Milan living most of the time. But it was different because it turns out they're friendlier and more warmer because they're further south and they're darker skinned. So again, if they're the darker skin of the people, then it was always like you have some kind of unspoken language, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, it's still there.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. But then, you know, you also go to places where they also had a problem with your color, like London, and have people spit when you walk past, or be denied a cab ride because you came off like you were demanding it, even though, for me, the bus that was leaving had my passport, my wallet, my portfolio on it, so yeah, there was an urgency in my voice. And the director, which was John Casablanca from Elite Models, told me to go over there and get a cab because he was paying for y'all asses. So, you know.
Right.
So what's the attitude? But then I realized, oh, it's a color thing.
Right.
And I ran into color too in certain parts of Italy. I found out people that were rich were always had a color issue.
Oh my God, yeah. Most of the time they do, and it's sad, you know. And it kind of brings me to, you know, I mean, the fashion industry is much like other industries. It's you know, our Black and brown people have to contend with racism and other forms of discrimination. So I want to ask you, what has been your experience, and how have you been able to navigate that?
Usually with attitude, and a quick response.
I love it.
And I dare you to tell me otherwise. Pretty much was always my approach. I mean, it's Jesus Christ, there's just so many of them. Well, one, go to Condé Nast. I used to be a makeup artist. And so at this time I was a makeup artist, and that's what I was doing as a full living. I lived in Italy for a while, and London and Paris, and I had a nice strong book, so I was getting castings. I had an agent. So they sent me to Vogue for some, whatever it was going to be. I don't know if it was an advertorial or one of those little one-page things where it's a makeover. Mm-hmm. I roll up there to the front desk, and the guy says to me, before I could say anything, that basically maintenance men and utility men take the entrance around the corner on whatever street that was. And I said to him, I looked behind me and said, okay, well, when that person comes in here, you could tell them that my name is Shaka King, and I have an appointment with so-and-so and so-and-so. Like, why did you not even hear what I had to say first before you started giving me these directions? And that was not the very first time that happened. That happened every time I went to any fancy building in Upper East Side, in the Upper West Side, or areas of Soho in New York. It was just a thing that clearly your brown behind was going somewhere else other than where you possibly could have been going. You know, just racially profiled all the time.
And you've just navigated it by not paying it, pretty much.
Yeah, I didn't see what, I didn't know what he was talking about, but he couldn't possibly be talking to me because I never opened my mouth. So I had to look behind me because you're talking to somebody else behind me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, because I haven't said anything and you're telling me where I'm going, and dude, does this look like I'm dressed like a maintenance man?
You ain't never dressed like no maintenance man. We can definitely I can definitely vouch for that one.
Me trying to do that as a fashion statement, and then if you in a fashion building, you would think all these years you've been sitting down here that much you'd have down packed as a look versus somebody walking off the street looking a mess.
People be miserable though too. Like,
Yeah.
people just be miserable and just want to, they convey that their energy. Everywhere they go, they trying to make somebody else miserable and comfort somebody. So I'm glad you were able to just not pay that no mind and just check his ass
You
and let him
can't
know
deal
who
with
you are.
You can't. That's the only thing you can do. The rest of that stuff, what can you do? Because they just are always like that. But I experienced that all throughout Europe too.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Following you, walking through the store, same thing in America. Another account though in America, Bergdorf Goodman. I was just thinking about this. Everything been going on, and I've been reading different things that people have been popping up. So Vogue stood out of my mind because they were saying, oh, they had no way of knowing all this racism was going down and so forth and so on. And I'm thinking about, well, I experienced it right off the bat when I was coming there.
Right.
But Bergdorf Goodman, I had a card at Bergdorf Goodman, and I had gotten some shoes at a place called To Boot. To Boot also had a boutique behind them on a street, and they had moved inside Bergdorf on one of the floors. So I go in, and they had redid the whole Bergdorfs, and I go in, and I'm looking at a couple of different things. I was interested in some cufflinks and a couple of other things. But then I was like, let me just make my way up to whatever floor it was to get the shoes. So what stood out? Well, of course, you always get looked at, and I was dressed to the nines purposely. So, yeah, I figured that was part of it. But then I noticed that the black security was looking at me. So I thought maybe it was a brother, sister, how you doing, dap thing. But it just felt a little more militarized. So long story short, I'm going up the escalator, get off another floor. What I noticed was I kept seeing this one black female security. I was always coming up an elevator, and she was coming down the escalator rather. I was going up an escalator, she was coming down the escalator. So at some point, I heard red coat, and I had on a red coat. So I just played like I didn't see her, but I noticed she was coming around and coming back up the escalator. So I stood on the side where she couldn't see me until she got all the way up to the top of the floor. Then I said, excuse me. They said, red coat, are they talking about me? I mean, I just popped out on her. Security, are they talking about me? When I said red coat, are they talking about me? She was so caught off guard, she couldn't really do anything. I mean, she kind of acknowledged yes, and then she kind of got out of there at the same kind of time, like, okay, the gig is up. He's on, but I'm like, really? Because I walked in while black? Or because I'm dressed nice and somehow you think that's a pimp? I'm not quite sure. Well, Bert Barney's had actually said that one time to the salespeople, and one of the salespeople was my friend, is that I bought a bunch of stuff from Barney's, and they said, he must be a pimp. Did you see his shoes? And the shoes I had on was from a company called Victoria Rishi, which was nothing but up on the upper east side, and it was no schlep type company. So I knew they didn't have a clue though, so that really didn't bother me too much, but I thought it was kind of funny. However, with Bergdorf, it pissed me off so that I told To Boot I wanted my money back. And,
Good.
They were very upset because it wasn't them per se, but they were in the store. I could care less, but I'd be damned if I'm going to leave here and leave $895 with you, mother. And I had to be followed around this darn store simply because I walked in the front door. So maybe you should tell them that you lost this money on that type of behavior.
Good decision.
That was it. I mean, a couple of times, the cops just want to say something stupid. Like one time we was walking down the street, me and my roommate, and we had our sodas in a brown paper bag, and one cop screams, they're sitting in the car, sitting against traffic on the corner, and you can't drink beer, you got to throw that beer away. And I was like, this isn't beer. I mean, he said, my roommate said, we're drinking soda. Yeah, what you drinking? I said, I'm drinking a soda. Yeah, ginger beer. That's beer. Ginger beer isn't beer.
Ginger beer is not beer.
And then he's threatening to write me up if I didn't throw it in the garbage can right there in front of him. So
I'm just glad to hear that you took your money back. Me and Jay and I were talking about that earlier, about how black people need to stop funding all of these different corporations that don't fund us and don't invest in us. The first thing we need to do is to starve their ass.
I don't spend my money if I hear that you did something wrong to my people. You don't get my money. Eddie Bauer back in the day, what they did to those black boys, they
I
never get a
know. I had the Eddie
Starbucks
Bauer
people.
coat. I stopped wearing it after, and people were killing each other over that stuff, and it's just
Mhm.
Yeah, no.
ridiculous.
I actually gave away my Eddie Bowers when they made that boy about the jacket, and he must have stolen it from there. This was like in the 80s or 90s. And not only companies, businesses, whatever. In New York, there were plenty of those Asian spots. There was one up in Harlem. Every time I went to, I would always go, and they beat the black woman down inside the place. And then so the black folks started picketing, and black folks are walking through the picket line talking about, well, honey, this is the closest place near me. Yeah, they got my roots that I want, whatever. And I'm like, oh, but they beat down an old woman just like you.
But that's
For
why
no
Asians
real
don't
reason.
respect us in so many respects, because they understand that we people now, the black folks nowadays, we don't really know sacrifice, and we're not a lot of the times willing to sacrifice like our ancestors sacrificed. Like the Montgomery bus boycott, that
And
took
my
a lot of
brother, but
sacrifice.
those were for me. That was my parents. That was a part of that era. So it was
Right.
only natural that my generation would be a part of that. But you're right. As generations have gone on and on and on, it's become less of a activist point of view. Like, oh, okay, they out there screaming and hollering, they acting crazy, or
Yeah.
into the media piece and just moved away from accepting it at all because on the other side of that coin would be attack. I
Mhm.
mean, what's going on with our peaceful protests? Not everything is a peaceful protest, and they're coming up with tear gas, rubber bullets, and pepper spray every time. They just went to the little boy who loved violins, and they was playing
Elijah,
the violins, and they
Elijah. We were talking about
wrong
Elijah
with them.
earlier too.
yeah.
If there's nobody who can
Pepper
stop it,
spray.
like what part of the government is supposed to? That what was that? They were playing Via Freaka Lens.
You
Yeah.
couldn't get more peaceful than
You
that.
could, right. You this how much more peaceful can you
A
get than that?
violin vigil.
Why would anybody send them down there? They should have never been sent down there, and if they did, they shouldn't have had no riot gear, no nothing.
That's my issue. When it How did all of this start? Who called the police in the first place? How did the police end up there legally? Because the police,
But there
technically,
were
they're
so
peace.
many of them.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be peace officers, so they're not supposed to just show up and impress people out. They're supposed to be called to the scene for a reason, and then they've had to figure out, what's going on when they get there. But people actually calling the police, like the Elijah McClain story we just talking about, that young brother. Someone called the police and said he was suspicious. To me, that person needs to be held accountable for what happened to him as well, because we are calling the police for no reason on U.S. citizens who pay taxes, who work hard, who give back to their communities, who are great souls and feed the community in positive ways, and we're calling the police on them. Now we're putting them in a position with the vulnerable position with police officers. We
Yeah,
have to take
dangerous
responsibility
position.
for that too.
Yeah, for those who call.
Right.
But I ain't calling on nothing.
We ain't
Because
calling the police.
yeah, no, I ain't calling nobody's police for nothing. And
Look, I'm
short
gonna
of,
call somebody, but it ain't gonna be the police. And you gonna, for real, you would be happy if I called the police, because the person I call, you ain't gonna want me called down.
yeah. That reminds me
No.
of my New York days.
You ain't gonna want me called
Reminds me
down.
of my New York days.
Man, look, I know I can call you too, Shaka. You a good brother. Like, I love men who understand like the power of a black man. I love you because you are one of our warriors, and you understand the depths of this BS that we go through, and you are the one who will fight for it. You know what I mean? And you're such a great creative, and you give back to our
Yeah,
community.
but if you don't fight, nothing's going to get done. You can't give it lip service. You've got to give it some kind of power of the pen. You've got to give it some kind of power of the mind. You have to be conscious of the world you're living in. You have to do your part. Don't keep going ahead spending your money with these people. Don't keep going ahead patronizing these areas that show you who they are. Don't keep supporting these companies these companies, be it a restaurant or a clothing brand you like, or toothpaste even. Don't keep putting your money into those types of establishments if it doesn't work for you.
Not
I
a
mean,
cent.
Yeah, not a thing. But
it don't make no sense.
people are easily tricked though, because since the Black Lives Matter movement has taken the momentum that it has, it's almost like a company can say, oh, we stand with the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, I'm seeing it on Netflix, I'm
It's a
seeing it
facade.
everywhere, and people have been so gullible to be like, okay, well, Nike's on board and, you know, they are starting to care about our Black lives. And people aren't seeing how it doesn't make any sense. Like, so now it makes sense.
Now you care.
Everybody's
Well,
like, Black lives
but that's
matter.
only some people. That's not everybody. That's some people, and there's a whole lot of other people who are calling them out completely on what they've been doing. And I love the people who come along and dispute it by having emails because they've worked there. The employees are speaking up. The
Yeah.
directors are speaking up. I saw something recently where an HR director just talked
She was
about
just got fired, right? Someone was
no,
HR, a black woman was just fired from a top company.
no, this was a white guy who was in HR, and he was just talking about, because we're talking about systemic racism and all of that. He came out to say how his employer had him grilled and scrutinized the 3 black employees the hardest versus the other 100 white employees in there, and how they denied invites to parties and how their times were monitored and stuff. And just as a white supervisor, how hard that was to do and so unnecessary. So I love the fact that you're hearing from other points of view too, of how this
That's
race,
true.
everybody isn't a racist that's out there.
Absolutely.
Okay, they are definitely indoctrinated. They also know how they must get along. Okay, because in their world, there's a small group of them that are fully accepted too.
Yeah.
Hand blue eyes rule over everything else. So if you're a redhead or you're a brunette, yes, you still have white privilege, but in your world of white privilege.
Right.
So again, it's easier for them to assimilate. Sort of like when you had very, very fair-skinned blacks and they were able to pass for white. They did because it made their lives easier. It wasn't because they're trying to be white. It just made their lives easier. And if you're caught up in a hell, you got to try to figure it out. So sometimes, you have a few of them that.
You know who I just remember her name, actually, Marilyn Booker. Have you guys heard about Marilyn Booker? She was working for Morgan Stanley for like 25 years. She worked on Wall Street. She was like the chief diversity officer for Morgan Stanley, and they fired her recently because she actually asked them to hire people of color. And she's the chief diversity officer, that's her job to remind Morgan Stanley to hire more blacks.
I think I did see that.
Yeah, that just happened recently. So, it's terrible that we allow people hold this much power over us. That's why we can't keep allowing these companies to gain more ground and establish themselves even more in our communities, because they don't fuel it, they don't fund it, they don't invest in it, they don't do anything to get back and rebuild our communities. So we have to just pull our funding from them all the way.
Absolutely.
I'm on a boycott. I boycott every day.
Well, it's a conscious effort. We've got to do it collectively.
Right.
In order for it to be felt, it has to be Selma marches. It has to go on for a whole year. You not spending your money collective other places, or you only spend a certain amount every other month at whatever. You understand what I'm saying? They have got to feel that it was not going to work any other way. Money is all America knows.
Now, how is COVID? I'm glad you brought up money, because you're making me think of the economy again, and we were talking about the economy earlier. How has COVID-19 changed the way you create and move around right now?
I work isolated all the time anyway. I'm always under quarantine, creating all the time, and this is my favorite place to be, and my spot, my number one spot, if you will. I'm good. It only got crazy when I thought I was running out of organic cotton, because I started making masks on a flute. It just took off for 2 full months. That's all I was doing. So it's just now that I do need supplies, and trying to buy things online where I can't touch them or really see them.
Right.
And it's like, surprise, it was the lighting, or the idea of natural fibers still included 10% polyester.
10% other stuff, yeah.
It can just be a little waning, but I'm just rolling with it. I got so much fabric and so many other things. So I'm like, okay, well, now it's time for you to start using this stuff. I mean, because think about it. If you couldn't go outside because you couldn't breathe, and you could still make money, what would you be able to sell to your customer?
True.
So I work working within the limits of what we have is part of our culture, no? Working with the
Really?
scraps and the leftovers is part of our culture. So until I don't have anything that I can put together to make a complete look or item, then I'd be destitute for product. So I have product. It kind of slowed up interacting with customers for a bit because, they weren't trying to really interact. But it was fine with me because I did curbside drop off and, they got it home and it fit perfect or whatever. So that wasn't a problem. So for me, it hasn't been an issue. But my parents are much older, so we can't visit them. And I'm
Right.
dying to go see my mom
That
and
is the
dad.
thing. I just having to shop for my mom every 2 weeks, get her groceries and get her prescriptions and do a lot more. Well, I was already doing that, but the fact that I can't see her as often, and like when I do see her, it's pretty much me bringing her something, dropping it off to, and trying to say a couple things, and but we just got to keep it moving. Now you can't be around senior citizens for too long and put them at risk for what's going on. But
that kind of sucks.
yeah, it does, man. It does.
Yeah, it does.
Well, before our time gets too low, before we run out of time, I do want to ask you, how do you evaluate success?
That's interesting. You can be successful, but you don't have to be rich. And I guess, and then you can't be rich. You could be rich and not be successful. So I guess when it comes to being successful, I don't know. Of being established, still relevant, still enjoying what you're doing. I think it's a certain level of acceptance for you to be successful. But I think you have to recognize it first.
Right.
And what does that look like for you? So to me, to be a brand that I've been independent this long and there have been highs and there have been lows, I've experienced a lot and I'm at a comfortable place now. So I know that I'm successful and I feel successful. I guess I would staying power, because I guess if I had fell off, then maybe I wouldn't feel successful in this particular venture. Being a designer and, and having a product that I'm pushing out there.
Well, I think you're successful. I mean,
absolutely. And
extremely successful.
I had a question about your models. So how do you choose your models? Do they have to have a particular look for you?
You know what? I guess it's something when I see them walk, that's usually it for a runway show. So we used to do them two different ways. And I would say that the one time I did use models by picking them from a portfolio and the agency cards, it was the worst show I ever had. It was during Fashion Week. I selected all the models from their look and the fact that they had, these tear sheets, and they was a campaign guy for this one and a campaign guy for that one. And we never really did a walkthrough. And when we finally got ready to put them on the runway, their walks were absolutely hideous. And that was me kind of buying into the industry. But the way I select my models is it could be the guy next door, it could be the guy at the bodega. I always had to work with what I knew, I saw, and I related to. Just like Donna, just like Ralph, just like Calvin, you always work with that what's closest to you because you see it all the time. So I always like my models to reflect real life for Black people and Black men. So I'm usually using a guy that most people would say, he's kind of street, or I felt a little threatened by your models, or the questions have always been.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that.
Because a strong Black man, so a strong Black man is threatening.
People are intimidated very easily when they're weak-minded, weak-spirited,
I always ended up selecting the guys that were around me, and then I would check out their walks, and they always have to have a swag and a style. They must have a personality more than anything. Don't have a personality, and if your vibration ain't on the same level with me, because I can have a low vibration or a high one, but I like that even keel vibration where you're trying to have no drama. You don't think nobody looking at you and saying something. you're not insecure, or at least you're not giving me that if you are. You know what I'm saying?
It's good. It's good to hear that, brother. And I'm so glad that is the way that you. That's your process for choosing your models. That's a solid process, and I wish more people had that type of process. But thankfully, you do. And we really appreciate you being here with us today, Shaka King. And we appreciate you for everything you do for the community, your beautiful creations. Kingdom is amazing. Kingdom by Shaka King is amazing. You guys tell them all your handles, Shaka, before we get out of here. Tell them your email and everything.
So Kingdom is one of the lines under the main company, which is Shaka King Menswear.
Yes.
And Kingdom is just a sportier line, which is really all of my Afrocentric type of designs fall up in the Kingdom's spectrum. But anyway, my Instagram is Shaka King Menswear, one word. My Facebook is Shaka King. That's S like in Sam, H like in Henry, AKA King, King. And my, what else do you want to know? Twitter is King of Chic 1.
Shaka King Menswear on IG. IG is Shaka King Menswear, right?
Yes.
Shaka King Menswear.
Facebook is also Shaka King Menswear page on Facebook as well.
Well, you guys make sure you stay up with you check out Shaka King and all of his designs, because all of them amazing. Thank you again, Shaka King, for being here with us today. Jay Sade, we appreciate you, my partner in shine. And we're going to leave this on a positive note like we always do. Today we're doing a quote by FDR. This quote is one of my favorite quotes. And FDR isn't one of my favorite people, but he is one of my favorite presidents because he did a whole lot to invest in the Black community. So this quote is: "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we improve enough for those who have too little." That was his inaugural address in 1937. Stay tuned to True Culture on Human Nature TV at YouTube. That is HUEman, Nature TV on YouTube. The revolution may not be televised, but it will be broadcasted. True Culture on Human Nature TV. Peace.
Peace.